access to technology should really be shared with more people around the world. And ultimately, this creative artisanal sector is one that I'm super passionate about, right? I definitely think there's a big enough opportunity and commercial opportunity, but is it the easiest? No. I want to make sure I'm working with people that I enjoy, that believe in what we're building, that want us to win, and ultimately are also believers in both our purpose, but also in our grand ambition.
Welcome to How to Help a Few Billion People, a podcast where we feature entrepreneurs that prioritize people and purpose over profits. In today's episode, we're going to hear from Ella, the founder and CEO of Powered by People. Powered by People is an extraordinary enterprise that works with over 500,000 small artisans around the world who aggregate their products oftentimes through more localized producers or distributors, and then get those distributed through bigger, large-scale channels and retail channels, including Etsy, and in the US, Nordstrom, West Elm, and more. It is a technology solution to a problem that on one side users have, who want to know where their products are from, who want to know that they were created ethically and sustainably, and that the people building those products were being paid fair wages. And on the other side, it helps these smaller artisans and these smaller brands actually get paid fair wages for the incredible work that they do to make products that people love. Ella's own story is fascinating because at one point in time, she was the owner of a company that was a artisan producer of jewelry. And as she was doing that and she saw the struggles that that industry was facing, she realized there was a bigger opportunity to help scale up this movement of really putting even the smallest artisan producer onto a global stage. And she's doing that every single day with Powered by People. In this podcast episode with Ella, we're going to dive deep into how do you actually start a social enterprise? How do you raise money for that social enterprise? And how do you find grant capital as a way to make sure you're creating a real impact along the way? What do you do when parts of your business model actually aren't working and you have to go through that really hard decision of laying off strategic teams to the organization? And how do you build transparency in the organization? And how do you communicate success in a way that will keep your valuable team going with you in the long run? We're covering lots of other things as well, including how do you decide if investors are right for your organization or if they're not. And there's a couple surprise twists in what Ella has to share. But before we dive into that, I do have one quick ask of you, which is our goal is to make sure that this episode adds real value, that we are helping entrepreneurs that are also prioritizing purpose over profits have easier and more successful journeys. So if you hear anything in this episode where you wish we dove deeper, or if you have questions or maybe even resources that you want to share with this community, drop us an email and contact us through our website at helpingbillions.org, or just drop it in as a comment to wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. So that's it, just a small ask. Help us add value to you by asking us questions, and we'll make sure to get answers to those questions and get better every time that we put on the show. So without further ado, let's jump into this awesome and inspiring conversation with Ella from Powered by People. Ella, welcome to the Helping Billions podcast. Really excited to have you on the show today.
Great to be here. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, so we've stayed in, I'm going to say in touch over the years, but it's been kind of like, oh, I know a lot. And then, we don't catch up for a while, and then we, kind of catch up again. And so, from afar, it's been really cool to see this evolution, not only of Powered by People, which I really want to dive into, which is, of course, your current work, but even the journey of how you got here. Before Powered by People, you were working in this space as well of helping smaller artisans and producers find and access markets for their products so that they can grow more sustainable livelihoods. At least that's my interpretation. But can you kind of talk me through of separate from the actual business that we're going to dive into, what here gives you the kind of personal fire to chase this mission that you're on?
Yeah, you're right. This has been a life mission, and I appreciate, Mark, that you recognize you've been probably dotted my life in many ways along that journey. So it has been an evolution from Soko, when I built my own independent jewelry brand, and then to ultimately building Powered by People, which is a platform for other independent brands like Soko. But it has all been built from a singular mission. I came out of MIT. I studied systems design, and I really believed that technology needed to be used within the creative sector to enable human capital rather than displace it. I kept wanting to build a business that I wanted to see in the world, so it was very much driven by my own sort of personal mission to have more sustainable options, local options. As a consumer, I wanted product that ultimately represented my values. And so I created my own brand, saw how difficult that was to sort of build your own market opportunity, be the financier, the logistics manager, the quality manager, and then ultimately decided after exiting and selling Soko, I wanted to build a platform for other independent brands so that ultimately there was a bit more consolidation in the space, and all still with this mission of how do we use technology to, in Soko, it was really in the production management, the quality management, the traceability of supply chains within that product. We were able to produce mostly on-demand product for our consumers, and we've translated that into Powered by People by creating a marketplace platform for independent brands to digitize their businesses, get them online, bring them visibility, finance those transactions, and ultimately support their fulfillment and competitive nature into the US retail market today. So all still very much with this mission of, how do I support other independent brands and artists who I love and appreciate? And that's kind of from my own personal sort of family history. My parents are both artists, but kind of bringing in my skill set and something that was uniquely what I believe to be missing in the world, which is how do you apply technology and robust supply chain systems and innovative business models within this sector to really scale.
I love that you brought your parents into it. I want to click just like a little bit deeper because one thing that's always
Yeah.
interesting to me is like you say some of these things I wanted to buy products that aligned with my values and were more sustainable, and like I knew who
Yeah.
made them and where they were made and how they were made. I think a lot of people want that, but you took this like very big step of being like, I'm actually going to go like produce that. What is it
Yeah.
about? I don't know. Do you have like an experience from back in the day, or like what was
Yeah.
the thing that like got you to go out and actually take such a big leap?
Yeah, I do think there's a value set that I learned very young, and that came from my family, that ultimately if you identify a problem, then you're likely the best one to solve it. Like it is in identifying a problem that oftentimes you recognize that there's a gap. And so I think that that is something that I've taken through everything that I do. I think actually this is summarized very well when I'm an Ashoka Fellow, and Bill Drayton, he actually had basically said this, and I'm going to sort of interpret, but how I interpreted really this Ashoka Fellowship is that you learn at a young age, at some point, between 12 and 14, that you have agency, that you learn that you are the change maker, you're the one that can implement the change in the life that you want to see. And I do think that that's something that has continued to stay with me from my childhood, whether it was mission trips or it was ultimately just working and volunteering in my local community, that I wanted to bring my skill sets and something that was uniquely my ability to something that I was passionate about, and ultimately something that can make big change.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's fun to kind of like go back in time just a little bit. There's probably a whole podcast just about that. But what we really
Yeah.
ultimately want to get into is like how do we build these businesses, right, that kind of live in this tension between like purpose and sustainability and profits. And so but before like really getting into the current of Powered by People, your story to me is so interesting because you built a brand, and that is hard. Like you did
Yeah.
this once, and I'm sure you have some battle scars from that experience. And then you were like, cool, there was this bigger problem that I saw, and like I'm gonna go back into a bigger, yes, market, yes, potential for
Yeah.
impact, but also bigger challenge, right? What for you was like that impetus to go, okay, I saw all these challenges that small producers have. I want to go build a platform in order to make it easy for them to get, bigger and mass distribution. What motivated you to take that leap into this bigger opportunity and challenge?
Yeah, I think you even said it, right? Like I thought building a brand was the best way to support a network. And actually inside Soko, we had 2,500 independent artisans that were producing for our brand. And I'm wearing some of it today. So it was a jewelry
Beautiful.
brand selling into the US market, all handmade in
Yeah.
Kenya, now gold plated. It's high quality product that was made in volume, and it was made to highest quality, but from this distributed network. And I have so much pride in what we built in that organization, but it did meet a point where, the demand is limited for a single brand. And I had actually built the roadmap inside my last year in SoCo for what is now Powered by People, which is how do you take a platform and a manufacturing solution is what we had inside SoCo, and ultimately how do you open that up to other brands? How do you create more of a platform and a technology platform where the efficiencies that we kind of learned and gained were able to be then applied in a larger and bigger way? And as an entrepreneur, I think, Mark, we all sort of ask ourselves, like, how's our time best spent? Like, we are visionaries, like, we're seeing where it's going. We see and we can feel the pulse of traction and momentum. And I think, there's a level of ambition there. I want to also apply myself to being in and having as large of an impact as I possibly can in the world. And I saw a limitation to that within a single brand. And so ultimately decided I had to exit my own brand in order to not be a competitor, perceived as a competitor starting a platform, but ultimately as an asset to the sector, that I could build this consolidation and resource sort of platform for other independent brands like my own in order to achieve the same level of success that I had in my own business. And so I do think, there's a lot of battle scars in now, but I think there is just this, how do you pick a problem big enough? And again, where you feel that you want to apply yourself to that problem, and it's a big enough market. There's enough independent artisans around the world. There's a big enough consumer market that can really hold this mission at a really global scale. And so that was something that was really interesting and challenging to me.
Yeah. That's you labeled something there, which is like, as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of effort that goes into building these things, right? And like, what do I, like, if I fast forward in life, like, what do I really want to be known for? What do I want to accomplish? Like, what do I want to look back and know that I at least gave my best effort to try? And I think there's a theme of that I think I've heard in these conversations. And it's a cool kind of like, imagine the future, then look back, right? You're going to regret the things that you didn't do. And here's just like another story that you're sharing of like, I went for it. I did it. And,
Yeah.
and now let's talk a little bit about like current reach and volume. So talk to me, how many different artisans are you supporting? And also like, what are some of the measures that you kind of look at to say, yeah, like this platform is really working?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I think, we today support over 3,000 businesses. We estimate around 500,000 individual artisans from over 100 countries around the world are currently represented in Powered by People's digital catalog. We then provide US distribution for just a handful of those brands in our dropship distribution into Nordstrom's, Anthropologie, the West Elms. We're just launching with Bloomingdale's right now. So some of the biggest retailers across the US market are ultimately our distribution channels for this global, so artisanal
Wow.
and really handmade and independent, I would say. So it's really a bridge of independent brands from, sustainable home. We look at clean beauty, and then ultimately independent fashion as kind of our core categories of brands from around the world that we want to provide retail distribution for them into the US. And so it's about, we estimate around 200 million consumers that actually can view our products based on our distribution network today, every single month. And that's now with this kind of global network that we're able to really provide this digital access for. But I think back to success, it's always, I think the reason why I've chosen a for-profit business model in many ways, as much as I'm purpose-driven, and I think that, that is ultimately what gets me up and motivates me every day, is really supporting my community, my people, the artists, the creatives, the designers of the world that I think just really express humanity. They are the people that I think deserve the most, right? And I'm a technology person. I'm an engineer, a builder, and a designer in my professional career. And I think ultimately that's what I'm bringing to the equation here. And so I think ultimately at the end of the day, though, it's around providing economic inclusion. It's around providing sort of business growth for these individual businesses. And I've always believed that, again, if I can help other people to be bigger and sell more and be more profitable, ultimately we can be successful. So that Venn diagram of our impact and our business success are 100% aligned. But ultimately, it is sort of a monetary incentive that is a magnet that pulls people through adopting new business tools,
Sure.
adopting new financial services, buying a mobile phone maybe for the first time, or implementing and utilizing a new technology platform like Powered by People. They're willing to do that if they know that there's a monetary incentive. And so I think it is a motivator for everyone. I don't think I'm misaligned with my community and my impact goal because we have a for-profit mission. I think it's actually what they expect from us as well, is that they're able to build their business and be successful. And so I just think commerce and consumer-driven, demand-driven solutions, market-driven solutions are a great way to sort of test and validate, our business model, but also that the products that we have are ultimately the most desirable in the world.
Yeah.
And there's just not that option and choice. And so we provide that to consumers as well. And I think that alignment is something that I think fuels everyone. The pride that we
Yeah.
get from having this beautiful product listed on Nordstrom.com is incredible, and
Yeah.
that's very motivating for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see how it would be. And I mean, I think, if you go talk to your average consumer, right, I think they would say, yeah, I would rather have something that aligns with my values, is sustainable, and I know who made it, right? If that choice is often not there, right? You introduce points of friction and then, drop off is there. So it seems like you're really getting rid of that friction. And if you go to these, what you said, over 500,000 artisans, I know that's through a number of, a smaller number of brands, but it's still a massive reach. Similarly, like these artisans, these producers, like, this is their livelihoods, right? They're generating income here.
Right.
And so of course they want to grow sales. And I think one thing that strikes me about your business model as well here is that, and if I understand it right, is that the producers, the artisans, you benefit when they benefit. Like, they have to actually make sales in order for you to start recognizing any profit. That's correct?
That's right. Yeah. So our business model, they're able to use the technology for free. And actually, this was kind of learning from being a global social entrepreneur, is that really having a SaaS solution and subscription model in a market where a lot of our artisanal network, when we first started out, was very much the handmade artisan. They didn't have a credit card to go online and pay for a subscription. And so it was entirely success-based. We now are global. We now also represent US independent brands and Canadian independent brands, these small women-owned businesses across the globe, indigenous-based businesses. Just independent retail is really what we focus on. So there's now more of that capability of online subscriptions. But ultimately, that wasn't where we started. And so I think we just tied it to success. They're able to access this market, and when we get a sale, we take a portion of that sale and distribute that to them. But we provide the distribution, listing, digitally cataloging their product, getting them up online. We then manage payment solutions for global artisans as well, and even manage the logistics solution. So it's quite a bit of value addition that I think we're doing that ultimately would not be possible as an independent brand on their own. Just really cutting down costs and consolidating where we can.
Yeah. Well, and I think, what's so interesting here is, like, you live that, right? And I think that's such a, like, entrepreneurship fundamental, right? Is like, those that have experience facing the problem are the best positioned to then actually build the solutions to those problems. And I think that speaks here to business as well. I'd love to kind of go back in time a little bit to, like, I don't know, first dollar, right? Do you remember when you got, like, your first validation that this business model was really going to work?
Yeah, we ultimately, our first, customers were really our friends. I ultimately was a brand owner and then came back and was trying to build a platform for brands. And so it was my own business partner was my competitor in the market, and so we went out into the market and we asked people to join our platform. And we said, we have access, we've built a brand, we know what it takes to sort of build this market access, have faith in us. And we actually had a lot of our first 500 brands that joined us ultimately were those that were through our personal networks. It's now expanded beyond that, but ultimately it was in building a reputation and maintaining good relationships with either people in the sector or investors. That 5 of our investors in my last business came in and seeded this business. So I can definitely say that it was through building good relationships and having had a level of success and trust that was built up in the market that ultimately allowed us to kind of get a kickstart into this one, which is why you are able to take on that bigger challenge, I think, in many ways. And kind of continue to go to the next level, because I wanted to solve the problem that I had when I was running my own business. And so, I knew how to pull in other brands that were having those same challenges. There wasn't one thing, I think, that kind of kicked it off. I do love still, I would say, going to trade shows, because all the brands that are there, they're trying to break into the US wholesale market. And I do remember going to my first trade show when I had not my own brand, but I was representing many brands, just the amount of pride I had in having all that product there and that they were bought in on this platform together. But then trying to get people to understand this as a technology platform was probably like the retailers that were passing by. That was a little bit of a harder sell. And so I definitely think it took us a little while to figure out the product market on the retailer side, but we've done that now. And again, have some of the best, sort of retailer,
Yeah.
enterprise level retail partners in the market today, Nordstrom's, the Bloomingdale's. So I think we're quite excited about, just those proof points continue to bring more. We just launched with Design Within Reach, as an
Oh,
architect,
cool.
professional architect myself
Yeah.
and designer. I think that was something that I was really proud of. So I think seeing this all kind of come full circle has also been really exciting from those kind of
Yeah.
early days and those early conversations.
Yeah, very cool. I can we kind of go because I think it's like easy to say like, oh, I went and and I built some trust and I got some of my friends or
Yeah.
or peers in the industry on board, but like really like in the weeds on this one, like because
Yeah.
it's still a big ask, right? You're putting yourself on the line. They're like, well, even if I know you, trust you, it's still like an unknown thing. Like, what if you kind of look back? What made you successful at building these like early partners when proof was not there yet?
Yeah, I think marketplaces in particular, I think are very challenging, right? Because you have to
Yeah.
build, the question is always which side are you building first? Is it the supply side or is it the demand side? And I think, where's the biggest bottleneck? I think everyone's looking for demand, so it was a little easier to get our friends on board to join the platform. But ultimately, it was. I think there are always those early adopters, those visionaries. I remember, my mother ran a retail shop. That's, she was an artist and she had a retail shop. She was our first customer in my brand, in my, Soko jewelry brand. Similarly, actually empowered by people, one of the, retail shops in my hometown was the first one that bought wholesale from us. And so it was a great way for us to sort of have that personal dialogue with them and say, how's the product selling? Did the platform work? What were the challenges that you had? Did the payment reconciliation happen in the way that you thought? And so I definitely think that they were a lot more honest, asking sort of getting into a conversation. I think as an entrepreneur, like one, we always are trying to understand really the root cause of whatever problem you're trying to solve. Like, I don't want people to just tell me what we're building is great. I think that's a disservice actually to entrepreneurs, is just to tell them, oh, what you're doing is amazing. Because I think, a good entrepreneur is curious. Good entrepreneur is really trying to solve a real problem. And so I'm always like, who's incentivized to actually tell me the truth, right? Okay, one of my family friends who ran a retail shop in my hometown, I'm going to give her $500 of credit to buy the first order of goods and see how she likes it, right? Like, and what she picks and what she chose to pick and what she didn't choose to pick, like understanding that, having her kind of, having too large of images that didn't load when she was in this small town, rural town that were, the internet that she had didn't allow her to like load our services in the best user experience as well. So all these little nuanced things that ultimately came out of having really a hands-on personal experience in like small buyer circle with our first kind of users was, I think, really, really critical. But also I think just finding those people around you that one want you to succeed. And ultimately, I think, that was the case. This was a family friend, but that also want to tell you the truth, that aren't just going to tell
Yeah.
you what you want to hear. And one, as entrepreneurs, always look at incentives, like who's incentivized to tell you the truth, and then ask hard questions and expect to get bad feedback. Like, don't actually persist until you get bad feedback, because that's when you're getting to the honesty
Love
of it.
that.
And then ultimately being able to pivot on it, act on that, change things, go back and tell someone, hey, I listened to you and I improved on this. How is this experience now? And actually, I've always said, running a consumer business, that's when you really get a customer for life, is actually when they complain about something and you solve that problem for them and they see that you listened and you cared. That alone will build more loyalty with the customer if you solve their problem than the fact that they had the problem in the first place. So lean in to those that are your probably biggest opposition in the early days, because they can be your biggest fans as well and your biggest advocates. And I think that's always been, I think, something that I've kind of thrived on, is the good and the bad feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think there's it might be a Bill Gates quote, right? You learn the most from your most unhappy customer. Um,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
um, and if I remember from there's like a Disney principle, like in the theme parks, it's like the like staff is like specifically trained to be on the lookout for when things go wrong. Like a kid drops an ice cream, like
Yeah.
that's where you can insert like moments of magic. And so yeah, it really interesting to see you kind of applying that, obviously in a very different setting than a theme park. but using that as like really an opportunity. But I think just to emphasize that point of like curiosity, it seems like you had so much curiosity really on both sides, and here is where I'd actually like to switch like a little bit, kind of talking about getting some of the first brands on the platform, but then you had to go convince Nordstrom and Etsy and these others to be like, hey, distribute this, like let us put these products here so that your consumers can do that. In those like very early stages, how did you get your first like big name brand to agree to that?
Yeah. I think we were very good about building a brand from day one. My business partner, Allison, is phenomenal at this. She has built brands, sold them within Club Monaco and sold to Ralph Lauren. Like she has had a lot of experience at this very large scale kind of retail level brand experiences. I think we really, from day one, acted really big. And I think that, how we showed up at trade shows, we publish our own magazine. The way that our website is, it is entirely curated. And I have to say, Allison has that beautiful touch to everything, right? And we try to catch up to that with our service level and our technology implementation. Those things take a little bit longer, but brand is something that we were very intentional about who we brought in and who we partnered with on our supply side, high quality, very well curated in a sense. And we've been able to expand beyond that, but it allowed us to build this incredible foundation. And so I think the trust was there just visually up front, and then we were able to deliver on that. So that gave us West Elm as our first major client. They actually were the ones that tested out our first sort of dropship implementation. We then bought all the product to curate that experience for them. We no longer buy product from our suppliers. We actually now just land it in our fulfilling that through kind of a warehouse out of Atlanta. But ultimately, in the early days, we wanted to control one side of the transaction to make sure we had really happy retail customers. And so I think that was something that we were always kind of, which side of the coin were we really trying to leverage or build with? And in the early days, it was build a technology platform and distribution and catalogs for our maker community and consolidate this incredible catalog. And then it became about, retailer acquisition. And that was kind of the marketplace, kind of double-sided piece of this. And now it's been a natural flywheel. We also had to convince some of our early brands that were partners of ours, hey, where are you already getting orders? Can we somehow support you with financing? Can we support you with the logistics, the payments?
Oh, interesting.
We're not going to charge you commission, but can we somehow get embedded into these transactions? That was ultimately also where we found that because our tools were more effective, they started bringing on their buyers into our platform for ease of order management, ease of payments, and logistic management as well. So that was kind of the flywheel for us to be able to say, okay, we get on great brands. We did that very well in the day one, but then how do we get them to help us attract great retailers? And now that we have great retailers, we're only getting more amazing brands. And it's that the marketplace flywheel, good assortment attracts good buyers, good buyers brings on great assortment. And then now we're just really on performance optimization. So it's just an evolving, snowballing, really incredible flywheel that we're on right now in our scale.
Gosh, so many places we could take the conversation, but I think the one that I want to start like moving towards is some of these like tension elements. And I think I want to use the retailer as an example, right? Where like from the impact side, I could imagine that you have a couple like uphill battles here, right? It's like, there's this really strong mission that you have to support these artisans and more sustainability into products. And you are fighting uphill because people don't totally understand, like, wait, are you yourself a producer? Wait, but you're a tech platform, and like how exactly does it work? And then there's like a novel, I think one of your innovations as well is how money is exchanging hands, right? And where you're inserted in that conversation. So you're kind of doing a lot of innovations at once in order to bring this to market. What was the hardest part about that? And ultimately, how did you end up navigating probably the confusion that some of these brands would have in terms of like, wait, but what are you actually as Powered by People?
Well, one, I think it was never about us. Like, I think as much as our brand kind of speaks to a sector and an ethos, I think we've always led with what problem are we solving for you in our partnership. So admittedly, we've made a lot of evolutions. We've never steered away from our mission. Our mission has always been, how do we provide independent brands mainstream retail access? how we deliver that has evolved a lot. And so to your point, we actually, in our organization early on, like again, we had to, be the first buyers so that we could acquire our supply side. Once the supply side was really consolidated, we had to, to get on that big major retailer, as I mentioned, West Elm, we had to buy the product and we had to be the supplier. And so it really became proving out both sides. Now they're starting to really, now we've removed ourselves from the equation and our technology does all the work. And ultimately that has allowed us to have no customer acquisition cost. We have no inventory risk in our current business model, but that wasn't the case in the early days. Like we had to take some of that on to kind of prove it out. So I do think it was, in the early days, it didn't look super scalable. And I think if anything, it was less of I think our value has been understood by both of our customers, maybe not, holistically by any one of them, but I think our value proposition to each side of the market has always been, I think, pretty well understood just by, do you want sales? Great. We can help you grow your sales and allow you to grow your sales through, sort of our solution. But I think ultimately, it is through, on the retailer side, it was really around compliance, high quality supply, and building that trust on the retailer side was, I think, super important. I wanted to say though, I do think that, for us, I've always believed that technology access really should be shared. So again, this notion of our mission has never changed. How we deliver has changed. And I think we continue to simplify this business model. And I want to get back to tensions, but I think it is important for me to say that like when it comes to sort of how do I apply myself to something that I really believe in, technology is something that I personally am a huge fan of. I believe that technology needs the productivity gains that we have, and the access to technology should really be shared with more people around the world. And ultimately, this creative artisanal sector is one that I'm super passionate about, right? So I think that ultimately the benefits of that, though, oftentimes when we think about technology, I went to China and I went to see a fossil watches factory and I saw them with CNC machines that had replaced, each one of them was doing the work of 6 people, and there's one man that was managing 6 machines. So there's one person that was employed where there used to be 36. And you've seen this evolution of technology in many ways and really benefiting ultimately the corporations and the mass production, that productivity gains going to the owners of those businesses and leaving people out of the equation. And I've always said, why does that have to be? Technology and the gains of technology really need to be shared with everyone. We need to make that more accessible so that you're not, ultimately you're benefiting people with technology. You're not displacing them with technology. And I think that has been something that's always been, for me, just a personal mission in life. It's like finding those dichotomies, artisanal and tech, putting those together and trying to say like, how can we make something really special out of that? And ultimately, where's the gap? And I think that's interesting to people. That's also, there's such a massive opportunity that's been unaddressed. We estimate that there's 300 million individuals that are in this sector, and largely they are left out of technology and kind of the online e-commerce space. And if you're not on e-commerce today, you don't exist. So we're really trying to bridge that gap of like digital inclusion. I just think that's a big problem and a fascinating problem. Now, when I go to some of our, sort of early conversations with investors, and the investors I have, let me tell you, are incredible. But a lot of the ones that I didn't let into this business really wondered why I was choosing to apply this thesis to really benefiting humans and why I spend the time there when there's not efficiencies. I've been told that my business model, there was someone who came in and did thesis research on my business model in SoCo and said, why are you working with artisanal community? Go to China and go do mass production. You can take all those beautiful designs that you make and you'd make so much more money. And I'm like, I think they missed the plot of like why we're doing what we're doing, which is actually to build communities, support them, have better product out in the market that ultimately, brings humanity together. I really do believe artists are sort of the best mirror of our society. And so how do we make that more accessible? And I think that's always been the thing for me that I continue to try to solve. But definitely it's from a commercial perspective, I definitely think there's a big enough opportunity and commercial opportunity. But is it the easiest? No. And is it the easiest way to make money in large amounts of money? Absolutely. If you want to do that, please go do mass production in China. But that is not what we're trying to do here. And I think there's enough consumers that are starting to react to the Sheins, the Temus of the world, and are saying, no, we want an alternative to this mass-produced crap, really, in the world that's filling our landfills. We always say when you're buying something, if it's cheap, I'm sorry, if you're not paying the price tag, someone else is. And that might be someone that is being paid less than fair wage, or it's the planet because it's being raped of resources that ultimately is being used in the making that product. So support your local communities, support buying from independent brands that aren't doing this in a way that is not scalable and sustainable for the community and the people that we're in with and
Yeah.
the world and the planet that we're in.
Yeah, it's so well said. I'm like, yes, like this is, this is why we're having this conversation, right? This is why we started the show. Is there's so much advice out there for entrepreneurs to say, like, yeah, this is how you go set up that plant in there, right? This is how you go sell on there, right? And I think there's a lot that you just said right there that I just want to emphasize, and I love the fact of like, why are we doing this, right? Is it just to get a ton of money, or is it actually like fulfill this like deeper personal mission, right? And I think there's a lot of supporting evidence, and anecdotally we're seeing it, across almost every interview on the show. It's like the purpose that comes from standing for something more than money is like, even when things are hard, right? It really keeps us going. And the other piece, and I want to reflect this back to see if like you agree, if I'm hearing this right, and if the reflection is right. But when you were building up this marketplace, and like you knew that you needed to use technology in order to like bring this to scale, but nobody out there, it seems like on the artisan side and on the distributor side or the retail side, were like necessarily shopping for a software solutions. But you knew their problems, like you were intimate with like what they were trying to do, like get more novel products in front of customers, right? Or distribute to more customers in an American market, as an example. So it seems like you were really, really tapped into not what you were building, but what they needed and what they were looking for. And you were able to then like translate your value to them in those terms. And then you've just stayed laser focused on those, and you've been continuing to innovate in the back end. And I'm curious, is there a mental model? Is there a framework? Is there something that you've like used to help you and your team stay focused on understanding what they are actually willing to buy versus what you are building?
Mental model for our consumer pitch, for me, it is always understanding the pain point of whoever I'm talking to. I do think that is something that, and what motivates people and what incentives are there for people. I don't know what that comes from exactly, to be honest. I think it's more just curiosity. And as a designer, I think I'm always trying to find solutions and build for problems. So maybe I'm kind of constantly seeking those out. But as a business, I can say that we set this out I actually did, I knew you were going to ask this question, or it was one of the potential questions. So I pulled out what I believe is sort of my great framework I always go back to when I'm starting a business. And in both of my businesses, I would say I would encourage any social entrepreneur to pull this Jim Collins hedgehog theory out. I'm sure this is referenced before, but I did pull it out so that I didn't kind of misrepresent it. But really, this is about building that clarity and simplicity and knowing that one big idea, and the whole concept of the hedgehog, there's a story behind it, and you can read the book. But ultimately, the fox, they're really good at a lot of things, but the hedgehog is good at one thing, which is defense, actually. But ultimately, it is just, what is that one thing? What is that one big thing that you can be really good at and you can win at? And I think just being so laser focused as a business on that, I think is sort of the guiding principle. So even when it comes to customers, I think that we don't want to be disingenuous to any one of our sort of critical values. And so the hedgehog theory really it's a Venn diagram of three basic things, which is, what are you the best at in the world? So what is your unique skill set? And I've talked about this a little bit already. For me, that is, how do I bring technology solutions to really enable people? That is the thing that I've always believed in. Supply chains, they're empowered by technology. How can technology be used to really amplify the human spirit and creativity rather than, again, displace it? That is implied in our business because we are ultimately a technology platform. What drives our economic engine? We sell beautiful, great product. That is our brand that I talked about, the thing that we're selling, the products that we believe that the consumer market really wants, and we can deliver on that. And we're uniquely positioned as a team to ultimately do that as well. And then what are we deeply passionate about? And that's our artisanal sector. That's our supply side. That's our unique independent brands. That's that, independent fashion, that sustainable home. It's that clean beauty that we want in the world. And so you bring these three things together, and you just need to make sure that you're not giving up one of them. And so you ask yourself, it becomes guiding principles as well. How do you kind of remain true to that? So can I make a lot of money selling this product, which might be you know, non-organic, polymer-based skin product. Maybe though it's not aligned to my values, or it's a product that someone else ultimately can get to market, so it's not uniquely positioned to us. So you ultimately kind of try to find where is that kind of sweet spot between all these three things. You don't give up on your impact, or you don't give up on sort of building for a really unique solution through your technology just to make the money. It has to be sort of balanced by these multiple things. And so, I do think there's also people that come in and are bleeding heart about it. And they say, okay, we need to only work with the most disadvantaged artisans around the world, but we can't get them up on our technology. And ultimately, the product isn't desirable and we can't sell it. So there's also, the downside of also being an impact-oriented business is like it has to be balanced between profits, purpose, and ultimately that thing that we're passionate about.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to reflect that back, and we'll add it to the show notes as well. But what are you best in the world at? What drives your economic engine? And then what are you deeply passionate about? Where do you have a deep sense of purpose around? Right? You find the middle of those concentric or the middle of those
That's
circles,
right.
that Venn diagram, and then that's how that's powered by people. Right? I think we see in your
That's
work.
it.
Cool. I love it.
That's it.
Okay, I wanna shift gears a little bit and talk about company building. You mentioned investors a little bit. Some saying, why don't you just go to China? Similarly, I can tell you that like some of the I swear some of the worst advice that I've consistently received over time of the journey is from the investment and finance community, and some good advice. I don't want to totally talk trash, but yeah, I remember we got something that was like, why don't you become like a website maker for nonprofits, right? Which is very, very different than like our business model, which was already like had real validation points of getting like
Yeah.
Fortune 200 brands and engaging their employees in this whole sector. But and aside for another show, but so I want to come back to investors. You said something which I love to hear, which is like there are some that I didn't let into my business. So and I've seen you at different stages of the fundraising journey, and one thing that stuck out to me, it's like it seems like you almost have a definition of what investors you're willing to bring in, and you take steps to get to know them and make sure that there is mission alignment, not just belief in your business model. How do you do that? Like as you're kind of going out, how do you start to think about that, and what become your red lines of saying like, yeah, we can become a good partner, or no, and we should go separate ways.
I 100% believe that every conversation with an investor is a two-way conversation of, we're vetting them as much as they're vetting us. And I think every entrepreneur, one, it does start with, do they have a belief in the vision, and are they aligned in the big opportunity, right? And not just a financial one, but like ultimately, why are you building this? Like you can make money in so many different ways, but ultimately, why are you building it? And do they feel aligned to that in some way? And do they see our purpose, which can be perceived as niche, of working with independent brands? It's not mass produced in China. Do they see that niche element as a competitive advantage and a moat because we're uniquely capable at it? Or do they see it as something that is a disadvantage because we're limited in their eyes? That is a clear signal to me that you're the wrong person. But ultimately, I have to say, I have not in this business let in many purely impact oriented investors. We have a handful of them, but I find you also have it's a double-edged sword on that side as well, where I already know that my business is based with a massive amount of impact. And if you're going to not believe in the incredible scale of my business, and I have to small myself down to fit your geographic mandate or your impact narrative, I've also found that doesn't work with me. And so there's this natural balance of like, let's be honest, investors are people too. I want to make sure I'm working with people that I enjoy, that believe in what we're building, that want us to win, and ultimately are also believers in both our purpose, but also in our grand ambition. And I think, those investors, whether they're impact investors or traditional VC investors, we've found them on both sides of the table. But I would say they're the rare breed, and those are the only ones I've led into this business today. So we have a great cap table, and I really enjoy our board, and I've been very intentional as a second-time founder, having built and sold a business before and had managed a board in the past. I think I did build this business with a lot more intention, for sure.
Yeah. I want to come back to some of these points about investors, but just on that last thread, I'd be remiss to not like pick on it. Any just like real quick, almost early stage lightning round of like, when you talk about building that board, like what are some of the maybe lessons learned from the first part that led you to say what you just said there about like, I've been super intentional about this go around.
Yeah. I always think don't formalize a board too early, but lean on your investors and let them into your business. I think the lesson I had from my first business to my second business was that I I felt that I needed them for money, and therefore I didn't always let them into my big hairy challenges. But on the other side of that, I would say don't also bring a big hairy challenge without already a solution. So I think there's an element of keeping them informed and keeping them updated and keeping them engaged that I think is so important in having a successful board, that I think we as entrepreneurs maybe either fully dismiss them or fully engage them. I think there's this happy middle where you're like, I'm going to let you in on everything that's happening, but pretty much as I've already solved it. And I'm not asking for permission. I'm just letting you know so that you understand my state of mind, you understand how this business is evolving, and you're feeling part of that. And if you have a big challenge, like, we can discuss it. But for the most part, I think I found that there's always a lot of support for that, the good and the bad. And I've always been surprised at how much support there is actually as well, which I think is an incredible feeling when they back you and when things get hard or there's a difficult challenge and you need to solve something quickly. For them to support you and not challenge you, I think that is a testament of an incredible board.
Yeah, it's great. There, Minaj from Drinkwell, so earlier guest on the show, talked about some of his board relationship, and there's actually a lot of resonance between you two of like actually share quite a bit, and
Yeah.
during like times of crisis, which they had, I know you've had as well. Like
Yeah.
they become like a strategic force, right, beyond capital. That's really important.
You need them on your side when things get
Yeah.
hard. You absolutely need them on your side, and so them to be informed is incredibly important. But don't assume they're working for you, right? Like they're there to be informed and they're to help when you need them. Have a clear ask when you go to them, but don't assume that they're just going to take a ball of problems and solve it for you. That's not really their job. That's your job.
As nice as that would be sometimes, but yes, that is our job. That's what we sign up for. Okay, so then you mentioned something else, which is I wasn't expecting to hear it, but I'm glad I did, which is, okay, on the investor side, there's two spectrums, right? There's the organizations that are overly focused on profit. They're not right. But then sometimes some impact focused investors become essentially almost too limited or create their own extra costs by saying like, oh, well, only in this geography or like only this specific thing. And in order to do it, you have to then like fold your business and your metrics and your reporting to meet this like kind of obscure thing that got created because, I don't know, somebody on the board of that investor just cares about that area or something like that. So I think that's actually really important to do and to suss out and to find. And it seems like you have these conversations, like you've got your hot list of items to make sure there's business alignment, to make sure there's impact alignment. And as you're talking to investors, you're going through both of those. Now, there is an extra weight when you are trying to tell a business story and a impact story. I'm wondering if you have any like,
I was waiting for this part of the conversation.
Okay, there we go.
Starting to sweat now. No, I'm just kidding.
So like in terms of maybe what's working right now, or in retrospect, maybe even mistakes that you made or lessons you've learned, like what are your tips here? It's like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're going out and you're looking for funding, when you have to tell both a profit story and an impact story, what are the biggest challenges you've encountered? And then how did you work through those?
Yeah. I don't actually make a distinction of like those things being independent of each other. We are what we are. We've built a business we think needs to exist. Like, it has this incredible impact. It also has incredible potential to be a for-profit, scalable technology platform. And so I think in many ways, that part of it's easy for us and how we explain our business. Now on execution is where I think that's really where it gets challenging. And I think whenever you put yourself out there and you say, we stand for something, we are standing for sustainability, we're standing for justice, we're standing for diversification of supply chains, and you're working with vulnerable people, you are then ultimately going to be held accountable to explain, well, how are you doing that? You have to be able to answer that. You have to be able to defend these things that most businesses are just for profit, don't have to defend why they call themselves the best of something in their industry or the most of something. It is not something that, it's a sales pitch. For us, it's not. It's how we work. And it is, our business is called Powered by People. We believe that ultimately the people that are in our business and that are in our community are ultimately what drive us. And the decision makers, the consumers, are what drives us as an organization. And we believe that has to flow not only to the beneficiaries and the participants and the consumers of our platform, but also our team. And so I find our team are some of the smartest, most passionate people and keep us accountable to this mission. We've brought them in. They've really invested in this culture and this mission as well. And I think that is an incredible achievement, but also something that I think, is an asset to us as an organization, but also something that we have to maintain that a lot of other organizations don't need to maintain. We have incredible people that are constantly challenging us as an organization as well. And then I think on the investor side, we do have to, explain, how maybe there are what they perceive as a vulnerability in the business, and we could see it as an asset. And I do think that, I touched on that a little bit, but we do a lot of philanthropic work where we've received grant funding in a large portion of our business. So about a quarter of our funding actually is intended for what we call pipeline development or capacity development in our communities, but it has no commercial benefit to us today. But we believe it builds the ecosystem that in 5-10 years might, right? It also allows us to retain this incredible team. Sometimes on the commercial side, we're also very commercial, where we're now supporting for-profit US-based businesses that maybe don't need us as much as an organization that we would want to find in Kenya that wants to have that same market access. So we're always trying to kind of bridge this bigger world of like the commercial. I want to get to a place where we're just profitable. We had a $1 million in revenue month the other quarter. We're hoping we can continue on this path to profitability within the next 6 months. That then gives me the freedom to continue to double down and invest on the more philanthropic components or impact-oriented components of our business, which we believe is just good in ecosystem development. But it can be perceived as a distraction. And so I think that it is a challenge that we oftentimes are trying to navigate as social entrepreneurs, where you're also kind of trying to figure out where your model fits and where it can work the best. And I think, both on the impact and on the social side, and you want those things in tension, but also aligned as best you can. And that's not always easy. Yeah. So I definitely think our team keeps us accountable. But ultimately it is a big challenge. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to come back to the grant funding, but before we do, you touched about like your internal team holding you accountable, and I think that this is an area where when you are a social entrepreneur, so you're existing for impact, we're using the power of the market in order to do it, and then you start to do things like you really manage your negative externalities. You're making sure that there's more pay equity across the team, right? You're going through all these pieces. As soon as you do that, your job actually now becomes harder, right? At least in the short term, right? Because now your employees will hold you accountable to those things as well. And I know from my own experience, I've had somebody like say something very similar to us of like, well, we're a social enterprise, like that you're shortcutting there. And that's not fair. Like, that's not what we stand for. That's not for our values. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. And how do I balance that against the fact that like payroll is coming up? Like I assuming that's true for you as well. And how do you navigate those moments when you feel like there's something that's the right thing to do for your employees, but the current business environment or your own just like economic health doesn't like create like an easy way in order to make it happen?
Yeah. It is such a real story. I think, we always say as entrepreneurs, it's some of the loneliest jobs. Like I think as a social entrepreneur, it might even be more lonely in some ways, because you're right. You're dealing with just the realities of the world. And, we're oftentimes coming from a position of access and, privilege to be able to say that, we can choose our values every time. I have an interesting story, actually. We had a retail partner of ours, actually, in Kenya. It was a retail partner in Kenya, not in the US. that we had a real challenge with. Our employees were finding that they were being harassed by this retailer that was a partner of ours. But we had a good dozen of our brands in Kenya that we were working on a program to actually provide them market access and real jobs and livelihoods opportunity. And it got to a point where we actually decided as a company that we were going to exit the partnership. And we gave the choice to the brands because we said, we don't want to make the choice on their behalf if they want to continue to work with this retailer, but we need to let them know that we're no longer able to support that access for them. We had to do that for our team, but I can tell you, all the brands chose to actually continue to work with this retail partner because they didn't have the luxury of choice. They needed to put food on the table. They needed to continue to
Yeah.
have that opportunity. And they said, you know what? I don't like her, but I don't like a lot of people in this world, and we can't always pick who we work with. And it was such an eye opener for me that sometimes, we do believe that, every choice is binary between good and bad. And I think sometimes that's just naivete as well. These are a lot of people in this situation that also, I do think that we were valid in making the decision to leave, but I also think it was just as valid for those artisans. And maybe people weren't as understanding of them. I think it was totally valid for them to choose to stay in that engagement if they felt that they needed to. And I think that that has also translated in our business. I mean, one of the hardest things I went through as the CEO of this business is that we grew really fast in the early days. Kind of post COVID, there was this massive consolidation of marketplaces. We were the online destination for global supply. It was a very successful business model. And then post COVID, there was logistics challenges, now tariffs, anti-globalization. I mean, we're really in a restriction in the retail sector today. So earlier this year, in January, we actually made an entire transition away from our old wholesale business into our new entirely digital, no inventory, no customer acquisition cost model. But in that transition over 2 years, really, I had to lay off team members in multiple situations because we could not make payroll if we were going to continue to grow and maintain the scale of the team because the business had changed. The consumer market wasn't there anymore, and that demand just wasn't coming in. We were entirely a success-based revenue model. And so for me, it was so difficult knowing that my biggest pride is in providing people with dignified work. That is why I exist, is to employ people and provide them opportunities. And hey, they've invested and they believe in my vision. And I'm going to go out there in the world and we're all going to fight this fight together. And it just made you feel like, wow, I let them down. I let myself down. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we had to survive because
Yeah.
we do work with vulnerable populations. We are solving a problem still today. And I think we will continue to grow into solving this problem for even bigger populations around the world. But if you don't survive, you have to fill your cup before you can overflow for others. I think it was an Oprah
Yeah.
quote at some point.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do
It
think,
sounds
though,
right.
that you
Yeah.
need to, I do think you need to be able to survive as a business and then being able to really continue to make those choices of really the values alignment to, kind of your for-profit agenda. It's a gray zone, though, and I think it is challenging. I'm also I'm not the highest paid in the business. So to be honest, like it's also I do think that there are things that we can do as leaders that also represent that, we can take haircuts on our own salaries before we cut people. I do think you can have those conversations with your team. I think that these are things that are, again, it's not also black and white on these decisions that they're entirely made by myself. Like I do think that we need to engage with our team. But I think that was some of the hardest things that we had to do were, really scale back on a team that was incredible, and ultimately just to survive. And I think it goes back to the hard decisions between really feeling like you're living out your mission,
Yeah.
and those things that are just the realities of the market that you're in. So
Yeah.
I think we're on a great path now. I think we're very excited about kind of our growth and being able to get to sustainability with our existing team. But then we're going to be in a position of strength in order to make those more cut and dry decisions around really truly just picking our values every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And yeah, in a conversation with Ed Booty from Reach 52, so earlier guest on the show as well, we were talking about that challenge of like how hard that is when like the people side of this, when like we take so much pride in bringing people on, developing people, like helping grow, and then let them go for business reasons. And we've actually seen this both anecdotally from other guests and also in the research as well, that the emotional weight, like the mental toll of being a social entrepreneur is actually greater, right? Because of the fact that you care, and that's part of your mission, not just the business health. And then being able to
Yeah.
move through that, then of course is more challenging. Now it also gives us purpose to like come out of the other side. And so maybe I'd love like some lessons learned from you on this one in terms of what was a really valuable lesson you learned, or a tip that you would have for anybody who's going through that, hey, sorry, we have to go through some layoffs. And then on the other side, what's your tip for then like building up team momentum? And that's both like your own, like how did you overcome that individually? And then how did you bring enthusiasm and hope back into the company?
Yeah. I think success, honestly, is the only thing that allows us to really replace any of the sort of shared trauma in an organization. Like, I definitely think, one, I had to make this big transition and cut an entire arm of our business that was non-profit making in order to try to give ourselves enough time to prove out the for-profit business model. That wasn't fully proven out yet when we made this decision. But again, as an entrepreneur, you're like, I can feel the data, I can feel the momentum in this. And again, you've already convinced people of this really big notion, big idea over the last 2 years. That wasn't super successful in the end. It was for a period and then it wasn't. And now I have to build back momentum for this new way. And admittedly, people are like, well, you told us that in the past. How do I believe you this time? And it only comes back to proof. I think ultimately just seeing the business succeed, people have actually said, well, you were right. You were right. This was the right decision. I didn't like it at the time, but ultimately we had to make this decision in order to get to where we are today. It's a better business. I feel better in the business. It's easier. It's stronger. It's a better sort of solution. And I think we maybe lost, one or two people that felt like they couldn't make that transition, and we tried to part with them in the most amicable way possible. And I think they're still fans of ours, and we're fans of theirs. But ultimately, it is something that you have to make a decision, and sometimes not everyone comes along with that decision with you. But the people that do, and they see the success, and they feel part of that success, I do think that that allows you to then rebuild with enthusiasm. But there was a period there where, to be honest, I don't think they wanted to see me around. I just wanted to be
Mm,
heads down. I was
yeah.
leading from behind, and I'm like, this is also okay. But that is sort of the reality of it. I think,
Yeah.
how do you get back into your power position to be able to sort of feel confident in making these decisions? I think as an entrepreneur, sometimes we're also making our best bet, but we're exuding confidence that we don't always feel. I do think that, again, it comes back to just having the success in hand. And so I always say, don't worry, just work through it, continue to produce, continue to do the work, and ultimately it will prove out in
Yeah.
one form or another.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, like, are you like in the midst of that, right? Both like during the layoff and then coming out of the backside, how transparent were you with financials, with the layoff, with what was happening next, with the challenges you were encountering, and also the wins? How were you keeping employees aware of what was going on so that they could both understand
Yeah.
the decision and see the success?
I think in the early days, I just don't think we had the data infrastructure to be super transparent. We are now. With our current team, we are 100% like, the goal, you guys, is to get to profitability. Stick it out with us. And this is the goal. And being really clear, we need to get to that $1 million of revenue every single month, and we're covering all of our own salaries. We're successful as a business. We can continue to scale from a position of strength. But I don't know that we were even clear. We were doing a lot of hedged bets in the early days. Like, we were starting new business lines and trying to serve many customers, and we've just been shrinking and focusing on what actually worked. And ultimately, that was a lot of the reductions were, we thought we knew the formula, but it wasn't quite proving out. And when we were forced to actually restrict and constrict the business, it actually forced great discipline. And I think that discipline is where we are today. We have an incredible team. We have incredible customers and partners, and we know exactly what we need to do to succeed. It's just a matter of time now. And so everyone is totally working in the same direction, and ultimately they're able to execute a lot more effectively as well. So we have a
Yeah.
company scorecard, we have, Metabase, we publish out all the company data from revenue, on the business as well. We set targets on profitability. So that's maybe the level of transparency. We don't show everyone's like salaries, but people do know burn rates. They have visibility into their own departmental sort of costs and how they're contributing to revenue. So we try to make sure everyone knows how can they influence the success as well? And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, that's quite similar to us as well. And I think it's the more that I've seen, like every time we lean towards more transparency, like the more innovation and creativity I also see from teammates, right? They become like partners
Yeah,
in sharing the weight,
right.
which is really cool to see. Um, uh, I can't believe how fast time is flying. In a way, I feel like we're just starting, and I've got like hours more of questions for you. But I want to get into our like lightning impact round where we got some rapid fire
Okay.
questions. But first, or maybe we'll categorize in the impact round, but just insert it earlier. You did make a statement about getting grant capital, so you've obtained impact investing capital. Just like, what are Ella's like really quick tips? We don't need to go, huge here because that could easily be an episode in and of itself. But just really quickly, how did you identify grant capital was even available for you all? How did you find some of your grant funders? And any tips that you have for entrepreneurs who are thinking and realizing ways to improve their impact and or de-risk their business model, chasing some of that grant or philanthropic capital?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, we were a little bit lucky, but also I think quite strategic. We do have a blended financing model. So we have, traditional technology VC, Silicon Valley investment capital, and then we have philanthropic grants from the MasterCard, the Gates Foundation. Where those overlapped actually was in our finance products. So as much as we were a marketplace, we were also monetizing our advances and also our payment terms on that marketplace transaction. And so that cash flow gap is something that we were able to even monetize that, fundraise debt for that. So we also have debt inside our organization, whenever we had a confirmed order, we were advancing 50% to the maker and then ultimately extending that 60 payment terms to the retailer. We charged for it, but also because of that incredible KYC data, transaction and payment data, that allowed us to actually go back to some of these big philanthropic organizations, which it is all about data and scale. And ultimately, they want to know our sector is also primarily focusing on women. We're over 65% women in our sector, 60% rural populations, and a lot of youth. And so it is a way for a lot of these philanthropic organizations aligning to their goals of impacting women-based organizations. We align to their economic inclusion through livelihoods creation and growth, but also through financial inclusion through our payments tools. But that's where our data was. So we actually found that it was quite easy for us to sort of go out with that data set of financial inclusion and all the KYC information that allowed them to track women, youth, rural, all that information that they needed. So that was actually where our alignment came from for our MasterCard grant, also our Gates grant that we are facilitating. So ultimately, those things are things we think are super critically important to the success of our business. But I think anyone that's looking for blended capital, it has to be one, it is 70% of the budget goes towards managing that budget. Like, it is so unfortunate. Like, I think in some ways just how much work it is and just being able to report back. But it is a wealth of information that if you can get more than one funder, it then starts to amortize itself a lot more, and you can really see the impact of your organization. So over time, it's worth it. I definitely think in setting it up, it's quite difficult. We are actually now a B Corp certified business because of the level of data. We had that registration last month actually come through, and we're very proud
Oh,
of
cool.
that. But a lot of
Congrats.
that, yeah, it was because of the robust level of data that we were able to collect on really those that were in our network.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're looking for scale. And so I think if you can find a way to align to that, to really a mass application, I think that's what a lot of these folks are looking for.
I think it's one of these things where it's hard to do when you're worried about, are we making enough money to cover payroll and operations, to make sure that you're also taking on that extra cost and weight of measuring and saying, like, who are our beneficiaries?
Yeah.
Are we actually improving their livelihoods, right? Are we increasing their earnings, right? And it's hard in the short term to justify those investments, I think. But
Yeah.
being available to then procure grant capital, as an example, is one of the reasons why that's worth taking that extra workload, even when it's hard. And I think that kind of goes back to a few points of our conversation, when it's like, when you're optimizing both your business model and your impact model, it's just extra work that you as CEO have to manage. And
Yeah.
there's a lot there. This is I wish I could just like have your brain. I was going to say pick your brain, but I need more. There's so much wisdom in your Ella, and I'm just so enjoying all of this. But let's get into our lightning impact round. What is one mistake that you've made that you really hope future entrepreneurs will not make?
You need to surround yourself with people that want to see you win. I think it all starts with having the right people around you. So I think be ruthless down to the friends that you choose, the partner that you have in life, the investors that you surround yourself, the advisors that you have. You need to make sure that you are surrounding yourselves with people that inspire you, model the type of life that you want to live, and then ultimately want to build you up.
Love that. What has been your biggest challenge in fundraising? And from that, what is one of the things that you want all impact investors to know? And if you want to scratch the impact word and just say all investors to know, we can do that.
Yeah, I just personally feel that we, again, went out and built a business that wasn't based on some sort of talking point that was super popular at the time, right? Like, I think right now it's defense and AI. Last season it was climate tech. I think there's always a season of things. We may have gotten lucky in sort of fitting into a few of those boxes in the past, but I do think that big generational businesses that are solving big problems are not going to fit in a box. And so, in a way, it allows me to filter out the best investors that can be creative and are creative about that and understand the opportunity there. But oftentimes we're too often, I think, falling into that trap of again, limitation of geography, limitation of, and rather than also saying, hey, this is a challenge I have for you. How could you grow in this geography, or how could you ultimately impact this community more? And I think that to me is more interesting, right? Is investors that actually say, hey, I'd love to work with you, but let's see how we can actually sort of evolve this business together to work for my mandate.
Yeah, cool. Love that. What is one leadership or manager skill that you wish you could turn on that you think you would make a more effective team leader?
I always go back to storytelling. I feel that storytelling and your ability, one, I think we create stories for and about ourselves. We're the heroes of our own story, or, we're the victims of circumstance. It's like, how do you make sure that you are, one, building the best narrative for yourself, to be successful in whatever moment you're in, but also to inspire people, to bring people on to really align to what you're trying to build. I think these are always the things that I wish I was better at it. I wish I was more charismatic. Like when you get me on a topic I love, I can totally nerd out with you on it, Mark. But I think in some ways I maybe am so passionate about my own things that I would love to be one of those more charismatic storytellers that ultimately can really kind of spin a tale. I would love to be able to have that
Yeah.
skill set in my repertoire and be even better at it, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, I think this is like a great example of probably an element of like your own like humility, and like we are our own toughest critics, because I'm listening to you speak this entire time and I'm like, I'm hanging on to your words. I love everything that you're saying. And funnily enough, earlier when you answered one of the questions with a story about the Kenyan retailer, and I was like, oh, people are gonna love this part, like just like the tangibility of that, is
Well, I'm
right.
glad
So
that I'm learning.
yeah,
It is something I'm
hey,
working on. Let's say
yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, when you get good at it, air quotes here, if you're not watching the video, I'm going to be pretty blown away because, yeah, and I've got nothing but compliments for you so far.
Yeah.
Okay, what is a quote, ritual, or activity that you turn to for strength when things are super hard?
I think as kind of a former athlete in my younger years, I definitely think it's about just getting active. I find strength when I'm like physically fit. I can be more mentally fit. I can execute on a plan. So when I'm super stressed, I do find that I play padel. I'll walk in the forest. For me, it's about being. How do you sort of get into more of a competitive fight spirit? So whether you're in survival mode and you're just trying to get through something, or you actually need to win a contract, or you're ultimately trying to sort of build enthusiasm and momentum in something. I think being kind of in a forward foot, I get in that headspace when I'm physically active. And I notice that when the opposite is true, it's also true. If I'm not getting out there and I'm not physically taking care of myself, I find that also affects my mental state, my sleep, all these things. So I think it's also an easy win. It's like, okay, I feel like I'm getting a lot of no's in my investment right now. How do I go and win at something? I can go for a
Yeah.
walk. I can feel successful in the morning by
There
8
you
a.m. I'm
go.
like, okay, I'm winning at something, and just kind of changes your mentality. So that's my way of kind of cheating myself, tricking myself as a life hack into being successful, I guess.
Yeah, I'm so with you
Yeah.
on that. It's wild how like I can sit there on a day and be like, there's no way I can find time to go. I'm so far behind. I'm like,
Yeah.
like not do, and then I like go out and go for a run in the forest and come back. And I'm like, everything's fine today. Like, like
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Not always the case, but yeah, yeah. Okay, and then who is another entrepreneur that you admire and think that we should interview on this show?
There are too many. I feel like if I named someone, then I would get into trouble. But I think in the consumer space, I know so many brand owners that I think are doing incredible things. But I really love Sneha from Uncover, and I think you should try to get her on the podcast because she's someone also that believes in really transforming the entire beauty sector with a highly technical skincare product and skin health brand, but made for the African consumer. And I think she's done this in a way that one just builds a new aspirational type of beauty and puts people under their power. So I love how she's approached it. I think she's an incredibly brilliant businesswoman, but is also transforming industries and doing good along the way. So not a traditional social entrepreneur in saving lives and delivering clean water, but I think that us in the consumer space, we need to support each other as well because we're also transforming livelihoods and economic inclusion for populations and transforming, what an aspirational beauty and dignified beauty looks like is something that can
Yeah.
transform how people feel about themselves. And I
Oh,
think that's so
absolutely.
important.
Everyday mental health. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's an
Okay.
important lesson
Well,
for all of us to have. So check out Sneha.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll do. Okay. Very last question. Where can we follow you? How can we support you?
Well, go out and shop Powered by People. We are on Nordstrom.com. I think you can search for us and we're part of the fulfillment. But regardless, I think if you can't shop in the US on Nordstrom, we have a number of other top retailers that supply our goods. But just buy independent brands. Don't go and try to buy the cheapest product out there. Do support your local brands, support people that are trying to build something that's a bit of a counter narrative to mass produced product. And I think that supports us in many ways. So go ahead and do that, and I'm happy.
Cool. We'll add links to these in the show notes. Ella, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your insights, and most importantly for
Yeah.
building a business here that really has such a positive impact on so many people on both sides of the marketplace. It's really a joy to learn from you today.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's always great to talk with you, and I always learn something as well. So thanks for having me.
My pleasure.